you. For EDS UGMC, are you guys complete?
Here and complete.
All right, thank you so much. So, because all of the ads are here and the teams are here, we can proceed to the debate. To the LO, you can start.
My name is Kamalinsha, and I will be the chairman for this round, with Farrell as the timekeeper for this round too.
Hello, can I start? Wait. Okay. Oh,
wait a minute. I'm sorry. Once the timer has been share screened and you are already called, you can start. But wait for a moment.
From the government team, we have EDS UGMJ with Maida as the first speaker, Tere as the second part as the third speaker, and Tere as the reply speaker. From the opposition team, Nabila as the first speaker, First Tolia as the second speaker, Akbar as the third speaker, and the reply speaker will be given by Nabila. Without further ado, let's start the debate. I call upon the first speaker from the government team. Maida, time is yours. Please count 3 to 1 before you start your speech and state your POI preference through chat, unmuting yourself, or any other method that you'd like. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Wait. Okay. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Government advocates for improving rather than abolishing this ITE law, especially when we place ourselves as Indonesian liberal activists. Exactly our mechanisms. 1, we're gonna advocate improving. For example, we're gonna push for campaigns to both online and offline to government about how to improve, right? We're gonna do research to see what is exactly too vague within these kind of provisions within the ITE law to Indonesian liberal activists. What are our few framings? 1, what is exactly inside ITE law, right? Besides the criticism and, for example, the provisions, there's also like online frauds, data stealing, or threats. This is very important to be talked about by the government side of the house, right? Where we exactly under government, we're still going to try to eliminate the vague provisions and defamation exactly to improve the ITE law in itself. 2, the interest of Indonesian liberals is to check and balance. They want better digital democracy if we can prove that the discussion is going to become more productive and better under government, we are exactly going to win. 3, what kind of improvements do we want? A, constant check and balance to improve the ITE law. B, counterbalance to get rid of the vague laws. But C, we still have discussions and also the government. For example, like lecturers that join amendment like the talks. D, we're also open to the criticism. 4, what is the improvement going to look like, right? What kind of hate speech that is exactly not going to be accepted? For example, we are not going to accept death threats. We don't accept any sort of I'm sorry about rapes. That is exactly a clear depiction. If it is still vague, we can still reform. Opposition are exactly going to abolish, right? There is no sort of policing about these kind of hate speeches anyway. I'm going to prove to you we're going to take a trade-off. Even if we do limit, it is still going to be okay at the end. Going on to my first argument, how we are exactly going to improve the political discourse within Indonesia, especially as Indonesian liberal activists. What is exactly improvement, right? The distinction in government, there's ITE law, but we want revision and try to fix those vague laws. In opposition, they don't have any sort of ITE law at all. I'm going to show you that in the macro level, it's going to create a better political and healthier political discourse anyway. Notice the prerequisite of political discourse is to actually like create better laws that is able able to have a healthy discussion, right? That is exactly the interest of these Indonesian liberal activists. Their agenda is to create a healthier discourse that is able to counterbalance the bad stuff that is exactly happening within the online space. Why is it actually like feasible for the government exactly to improve this through the Indonesian liberal activists? One, Indonesian liberal activists like maybe rising and eliminating the vague provisions, right? The fact that even second, the fact that even Jokowi says to eliminate these vague provisions, then exactly we're that powerful. We don't think that there is any sort of need to abolish this ITE law anyway. But three, this is also a communal right to create improvement the way they want to improve the ITE law that is harmful to the society itself. So it is still like able to improve like the whole society. But okay, even if those kind of feasibility is still like on both sides, then what is the exclusive harm within opposition? Exactly, it's going to be worse in opposition, right? The political discourse in opposition is going to be that like lots of like bad stuff, right? Notice that Indonesia is, for example, too polarized. The discussion is exactly going to be bad under opposition. So then, instead of these kind of people that engage in within online political discourse, instead of criticizing the government and their kind of policies, they're going to use, for example, like ad hominem. They're going to be focused on like, for example, the appearances of the government and such, instead of actually criticizing the policies that they exactly make, right? When this kind of thing happens under opposition, and even the hate speech that happens within opposition, right? This is going to be worse, because then the political discourse won't actually be focused on trying to change like the reform, trying to change the policies, but instead focus on this kind of bad criticism that is exactly happening. Notice, if we want as the Indonesian liberal activists, we want to try to criticize these policies, and we want someone to do self-reflection, we need to exactly point out what they're exactly going to reform, right? And opposition is they're going to like prioritize their ego, for example. They're going to focus on saying like Jokowi is better, for example, without any real context, right? What is the conclusion? It is going to be better in government when we actually try to improve anyway, right? Instead of this kind of improvement, we're going to try to get rid of like outright hate speech with a clear distinction as to what with getting rid of the vague provisions. This is exactly going to create a better political discourse, right? Where if you want to jump in, exactly you got to make clear you exactly got to have like good contributions towards the politics anyway. Even if opposition like wants to come up and say their counter mechanism is to create a new law in the future, it is not going to be good. One, at best, it's going to take a long time to devise like huge new laws, especially for Indonesia when you're talking about ITE laws, right? Two, then there is exactly no difference with the government side of the house, because we also want to create improvement for these people. Why is it better than exclusive in government, right? At least we don't add this kind of more time. Notice in creating this, it is so time sensitive, especially when devising something that's detrimental to the law, where people can also like get frauds, scams, and such, right? When that exactly happens, then opposition also hurt those people anyway. So we think improvement is exactly the best thing. That is the best thing to create a better political discourse anyway. Second argument, let's talk about on the individual level. We're gonna take the trade-off. Why, even if we do like trade-off like some sort of freedom of speech, it is exactly going to be better in government. Notice, individuals' agency can be limited when it harms other individuals. How is it going to look like with no sort of ITE law, right? For example, there's going to be there's going to be people that mocks without getting punishment. For example, there's a chance that you're going to say death threats or even, I'm sorry, like rape threats. Why is this exactly going to be likely? Because notice the main thing about ITE law is that you're going to police this kind of discussions or even what the individuals say, right? We think without any sort of policing about like the hate speech and such, it is exactly going to be worse under opposition in trying to prevent these kind of people. Exactly, your right of freedom of speech can be limited when you hurt these other individuals anyway, especially when you threaten them, right? Notice Indonesian liberal activists also want to create a safe space for the online community. This through counterbalance of what people exactly say. Why is this kind of like speech of like bad speech exactly so impactful as the individuals? One, when you give credit to someone, it can affect their real life mentality. For example, it affects their productivity, it clouds their mind, it affects their physical being and even their paralyzed, for example. Two, essence of social media is exactly to run away from the real world and feel safe, right? In opposition with no sort of ITA law, it's going to be harmful. It's going to be harmful because you don't provide this kind of safe space anyway. The conclusion, it is better with ITA law. One, okay, sure, there's certain limitation, but it is exactly for the greater good. Two, for example, that's limiting with the power of Indonesian liberal activists that's going to push for more moderate where criticism is still allowed anyway. That is exactly why we propose.
The first speaker of the government team spent 7 minutes and 24 seconds. I call upon the first speaker from the opposition team, Nabila. Time is yours. Please count down 3 to 1 before you start your speech and state your POI preference through chat, unmuting yourself, or any other methods that
they need to reform this kind of policy exactly because statistics shows that this kind of policy is not effective and hurting people only. Dragon, for example, but actually the manifestation of this. Government is less likely to doing a self-reflection and self-evaluation exactly because they can mapping what actually the demand of society, for example, what actually the opposition political party and opposition political party supporter actually want, for example, what is people in Sumbar and people in Sumatera Utara want to achieve and demand to the Jokowi and the demand of government, for example, exactly because discussion and the target of you mocking the government is never clear. But second, this is also really important to break the echo chamber. That's actually characterized with actually the political discourse that exists in Indonesia. It is so polarized. So Jokowi supporter only talk and want to hear the discussion coming from the same people that come from their echo chamber, and also Prabowo supporter only want to hear the Prabowo supporter opinion. This is exactly really bad because when they're only research the people that come from the same echo chamber, if you are not triggered to opt into the political discourse with the more proper method, most likely this kind of people will hear only the bad thing from Jokowi, for example, even without a reasonable reason. They only hear that Jokowi is really bad and incapable because Jokowi is stupid, for example. This is exactly bad because, again, the bias and cult of personality to hate government will exactly bigger in your side of the house. At least, if they're really trapped in their own echo chamber right now, me as a Jokowi supporter, if I want to convince my other family to support Jokowi, I can use like something like Jokowi is ugly, but instead I need to focus and read the journal, for example. I need to doing a research what kind of policies that Jokowi next that is really bad, for example. So again, the discussion and also the demand coming from society, even though they have become opposition political party and opposition political party supporter, will be exactly clear under government. But thirdly, this is also important because most likely the opposition is the one that always have incentive to criticize the government. Exactly because I don't like Prabowo. If Prabowo become the president, I always be the one that gonna criticize them because I inherently hate maybe Prabowo. You are not, but the bad thing in opposition, you are not trigger them to opt in the digital democracy with proper and productive method. You allowing people to say that Prabowo is incapable compared to Jokowi and only say that with an unreasonable reason. But fourthly, this is also really important because since the framing that we need to agree is social media is really inclusive, this is maybe the only method of people only the God and unprivileged people to know what is actually the discussion that always happen. You can maybe say that, oh, there is a referendum, oh, this is a meeting of politics. This is only accessible for elitists and also politicians that hold the power. But comparatively with people that live in the rural area, for example, the only platform that they have to know about economy, about politics is only social media. This is why exclusive benefit of government is at least we provide and improving the only platform that this unprivileged have to know about politics. This is why I already prove to you in my rebuttal that narrative about politics is really elitist, for example. Politics is only for people that educated, for example, is exactly at least better and reduced under government because right now we also make a productive discussion inside of the internet, for example, not only in the referendum, for example. We only want to make a simple statistic to make unprivileged people understand, for example. This is less likely happening in opposition because I me as a supporter Jokowi, I always think that why I need to make a statistic about how bad policies of Prabowo, because I still can like doing ad hominem towards Prabowo, for example. This is something that Mbak Lia need to answer. But second engagement, when they said that why this is not become the tool of why this is not become the tool of government to abuse of power. Four responses into this. Number one, no, government want to maintain image, especially in current context when Indonesia government already has a low accountability. For example, police brutality that happened between FPI and embodiment of government, or a lot of corruption in PDIP. Most likely, they want to also bring political horse trading. They also want to win the next election. So that this kind of templating response is still very important when we're talking about Indonesian politics, exactly because right now people are in distrust with embodiment of government. But second, we can also improve and give counterbalance to the parameter of UITE constantly. The fact that in opposition, you can abolish the law, it means in government, you also have political leverage to constantly doing check and balances. But thirdly, even though to certain extent control and intervene right happen, this is normal in democratic system because we want to achieve a greater good. For example, maybe opposition can say that taxation is bad because it intervene a right and fruit of hard work of rich people, but we still doing it because we want to doing redistribution to the vulnerable people. But fourthly, even though at worst government is really evil, I think in democratic system there will always be alternative to tackle down evil regime. For example, if the condition is that fucked up, you can doing judicial review to maybe really abolish it, or in the next election you maybe not vote by the IP again. But the comparative advantage that you don't have in opposition is productive discussion. Proud to propose.
The second speaker from the government team spent 7 minutes and 27 seconds. I call upon the second speaker from the opposition team. First, Solia, time is yours. Please count down 3, 2, 1 before you start your speech. Thank you.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
No preferred pronoun and POI through chat or open your camera. Yeah, I think that's it. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So essentially what you get from proposition is that what they want to change is that, oh, the previously fake wording is going to be more clear cut and it's going to be more clear. But what you don't change with the amendment that exists on their side is that the conduct, the sanction, and the attribution of power would still exist on government. What does it look like? It means that in order for government to protect people, to not make ad hominem arguments, government would police your Twitter, government would police your WhatsApp, government would police all of the social media that you have. And this is exactly not the interest of Indonesian liberal activists, right? Because you don't want government to have that much control. As long as UU ITE exists, they can just stretch this law to fit whatever it is they want. Like, it's not like when Gejayan memanggil exists, they said that Jokowi is ugly. It's not like they said that the current government is like immoral or whatsoever. There's exactly criticizing the policy, right? But they still have their WhatsApp confiscate, their WhatsApp to be blocked. They're still unable to access internet and whatsoever. So as long as you still give power towards the government, as long as UU ITE exists, those attribution of power would always exist for the government, and all of the healthy discussion that they want to have is not going to exist at all, because government will still have the power. Government can confiscate your social media and stuff. But the second thing that they forgot, which is what exactly is exclusive from this law, right? Because we told you that if it is about identification of fraud, for example, that already exists in commerce law, right? It's not any different with scamming people. I think that's already punishable in status quo. As long as you can prove harm, status quo mechanism and status quo law can exist and prosecute people who do bad things to others. I don't know what exactly a special contribution that UU ITE have. But second, notice that in social media, you also have community guidelines. Twitter, Instagram, all have that in order to protect offensive content. Why then, when you already have that, you want to add government who have political interest? Why then government is necessarily a better actor in regulating the life of people, considering that you have a non-partisan actor who have no political interest at all? Then this is the burden that they have to answer, right? So as long as they cannot prove why then the conduct, sanction, and distribution of power is going to change, they're going to lose the debate. First thing that I want to talk about is the likelihood. They claim that it's not likely for us to abolish the UU ITE. They said, oh, if government is evil, then they're just not going to do anything in both sides. It's symmetrical. No, I think what Tani has told to you is that when it comes to UU ITE, there are already a lot of people who became the victims of this, right? This is how you can gain mass. This is how you can gain political power, because people can relate towards the emotional story of people being persecuted for giving a speech, for example. Those kind of things exactly is going to be your political capital. Why then this political capital cannot translate on their side? Because when you still want UU ITE, you are still going to say that, oh, UU ITE is not 100% that bad. It means that you are also going to erase the victimhood of these people, because the law that victimize you, the law that exclude you from being an active citizen, still have some validity, still have some accuracy, and it still saves me. Therefore, the powerful figures that can influence society with their emotional stories, for example, are not going to exist at all on their side. That's why you gain significantly lesser mass in order to get people. Why that this is necessarily the case, and why that this is true? Tani has told you a very intricate analysis telling you that most people don't know law. I think because when it comes to law, you need like an extensive education to understand how it's being interpreted. What are the process that you need to go through? That's why when you don't have emotional and powerful emotional figure to tell their story, you're going to have a lot less mass on their side. This is the reason why it's less like in balance. It's less likely for their amendment to pass. But secondly, even if in the worst case scenario, you cannot abolish UU ITE, why then this is still better on our side? Because at least we shift the Overton window, right? When argument is extreme, I think government is much more likely to meet in the middle and do the changes that you want. Because if you already set a really low bar at first, for example, it's much more likely that they meet in the middle, which is a lot lesser than what you would get if you would demand for something that is extreme. The example is that the reason why we have special autonomy law for Papuans is because OPM pushed for independence instead of a special law, right? Same logic applies to this. So therefore, it's much more likely for your interest as a liberal activist to be catered on our side. But secondly, talking about safe space, right? Why then it's not going to exist at all? I think, first of all, I think it is untrue that this is the interest of Indonesian liberal activists. Your interest is for government to have as minimum authority to govern your life, because like even if your interest is safe space and healthy discussion, this is the prerequisite to get that, right? Because as long as government still policing you, government is still the one who hold the parameter, what is an ad hom argument and what is not an ad hom argument, you are not going to be able to have free speech. You are not going to be able to have a healthy discussion, because people always fear to express their argument. But secondly, notice that we have given you an example how in Gejayan memanggil, for example, it's not an ad hom argument, but government can still confiscate your things anyway, because they can just use the excuse that, oh, well, it hasn't happened, but we want to prevent at home and whatsoever. But thirdly, I think it's problem. The way they respond to our case was extremely problematic, right? They claim that, oh, at home cannot exist at all because the policy discussion is not going to be productive. First, I think this is untrue. In order for you to include as much people as possible is to make sure that the issue comes to surface. The reason why in status quo, a lot of regional corruption can exist and be investigated by the media is because some random dudes on Twitter start making a thread on like infidelity cases of some pejabat, for example. And this leads media to have a further investigation. And that leads to opening cases like corruption money, like how government in some places faking budget allocation, for example, in order for their personal use. But the prerequisite is you have to ensure that this is going to be a sexy issue first. And in the first step for you to do that, sometimes it requires ad hominem to do that, because most people don't have expert knowledge in law. And the only way for media to have incentive is when they know that a lot of people is going to subscribe and click. And well, if that's the worst case that we have to defend, more than happy to do it.
The second speaker from the opposition team spent 7 minutes and 29 seconds. Moving on to the third speaker of the government team, Reinhardt. Time is yours. Please
Okay,
count down 3 to 1 before your speech. Thank you.
cool. So, my POI preference is on the chat. My gender pronoun is he, him. And because I lost in the octo final of ALSA last year, so I want to feel like I'm in the auditorium. So please let me be. Gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Let's frame this debate into our favor, right? 1, let's do, Mbak Lia, please do not do strawman. We do not support the status quo. We want to clear out the parameter. So if you want to say that we confiscate the Gejayan Memanggil, no, we will not do that. We will clear out the parameter to ensure that the people in the Gejayan Memanggil will not be confiscated, but those who create a vulgar drawing, for example, those are the people who will be confiscated. These are the reform that we are actually going to create. Please listen to our characterization. But secondly, they never even singly responded to our case about data stealing, hacking, fraud, and so on and so forth that is being controlled by UU in itself, right? If you want us to support the extreme burden of like blocking the internet in Papua, you need to also explain your burden in your side of the house, because literally ITE controls this, and you will let the people who are the most vulnerable of this into vulnerability, into harms. I'm going to talk about 3 things. Firstly, let's talk about the likelihood of succeed. What did we say in government side? We told to you the likelihood of succeed in 2 layers. Firstly, we told you about the interest of the government. Literally, Jokowi already is the one who proposed the amendment to the House of Representatives. What does it mean, right? It means that there is already a goodwill coming from the incumbent government. There is already an elite interest to actually reform the law in itself, right? Therefore, reforming the law have significantly more political leverage from the elite in comparative to their side. But secondly, let's talk about masses, right? 1, let's talk about those who are feeling violated by the OITE. They will not move from us, right? Because we will be comparatively lesser evil than those conservative people who choose to shut the hell up, right? But also in our side of the house, we will also provide closure to them, because we will say to them that, oh, you do not need to worry, because we will clear out the parameter that all the criticism will be justified, but only the extreme, very offensive one that will be blocked. We will ensure your safety of criticism and so on and so forth. Therefore, these people will also support us. But secondly, those people who are being threatened online with threat, data stealing, and so on and so forth will not be our opposition, right? Because in your side, you will remove the protection towards them. Even if you say that there is other law and so on and so forth, your advocation, that's basically telling that you will remove this protection, even if at the best case it is not true, also a threat to them that creates an opposition in your side that makes your movement less likely to win. But how did they respond, like, right? They respond by saying, if you are extreme, you will be more acknowledged, and therefore we can create a political horse trading. I have 2 responses to this. No, the acknowledgement already exists in status quo, therefore that is not what we practically need, right? Literally, Jokowi already do this. Menkumham already announced that it needs to be reformed. But secondly, acknowledgement is not a freaking benefit. There needs to be an analysis on whether is it a good acknowledgement, which leads me to the idea of political horse trading, right? Because the LO wants to say that if we ask for more, therefore the compromise will be better. No, we don't think so, right? In status quo, Jokowi already took interest of it. The moment you as a liberal constituent are going to ignore this goodwill, that's the moment that you will be an uninteresting voter basis. The government will also vilify you because they can simply say that I already provide this, but these people asking for more. This is why I do not need to listen to these individuals. This is why you shut down the political horse trading, the discussion and compromise, right? But second thing is they say that what we ask will be small stuffs, right? No, it will not be small, right? But because if you have the political leverage to actually abolish the abolish the freaking law, you can also have the political leverage to ask for bigger stuff, right? And notice that the elites has took interest in this. That's the moment you have more leverage to ask bigger stuff. Therefore, on the likelihood to succeed, we win on a landslide. But second point of issue, how do we give betterment for the individuals, right? We told you that hate speech is equal to murder, right? How does it look like? Violation is bad because it removes people agency. Freedom of speech and on expression can always be limited when it comes to harming other people's agency, right? What will happen when you are getting a hate speech? What will happen if someone says to me that, Reinhardt, your speech is very bad, he deserves to get 69, for example? I will be very paralyzed, right? I will not be there will be an opportunity cost to me. I will not be like confident to come to ALSA UI, for example. There's an opportunity cost in that. It paralyzes and overcloud my feeling, therefore reduces my agency. Therefore, notice that your speech are able to remove other people's agency. That's the moment you need to be punished by the government. But how did they respond, right? They respond by saying, social media company punishment is enough. No, thank you. I have two responses to this. Firstly, notice that social media company are operating on the international basis. Therefore, the likelihood for you to oversee a certain cases is highly likely. But on the comparative in our side of the house, you have a regional policy. Therefore, you ensure that the oversee is unlikely to be happen. But even if so, right? Let's take. But if even if there's social media, is it proportional? Let's ask that. If someone hit me in the face, for example, until I am hospitalized, is it just if you just remove them from Twitter, right? No, these people needs to be jailed, because notice that I already create a collapsing distinction that speech equals to murder, that is equals to paralyzing me physically and mentally me. Therefore, the proportional punishment needs to be jail, needs to be legal punishment. Why? There are two reasons to this. Firstly, on the principle of proportionality, but second and the most intuitively is deterrence. Because in your side, if the social media blocks you, you can literally make a new Twitter and make a new internet protocol with VPN, right? There is no deterrence to that. Therefore, we marginally give betterment to the individuals who are feeling violated. But thirdly, how does it give better political discourse? What did we told you? We told you that the ability to make and pinpoint the precise problem, because it's not convoluted by the ad hominem. But secondly, we also remove the probability of the convoluted of personality, because you will focus on the problem. Thirdly, we will also incentivize the political education on the social media, right? But what did they respond? They respond by saying, ad hominem is good because you create urgency. But that's non-comparative, right? Because when we told you there is a certain problem with statistic and so on and so forth, you will also understand the problem. But even better, the government and the individuals know precisely what the problem is. Therefore, the lobbying will be better. People more understanding about the political discussion. We are very proud to win this debate. Thank you.
The third speaker from the government team spent 7 minutes and 27 seconds. Moving on to the third speaker of the opposition team, Akbar. Time is yours. Please count down 3, 2, 1 before you start your speech. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Wait, okay. POI to the chat. POI preference. Yeah, POI preference to the chat. I'm gonna set up my timer first. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We need to frame out several contention from the government side house. Firstly, talking about safe space in social media. If it's indeed true that escapism is the utility of social media, you want to pertain that, we say that either what Taini said, that there is a social media policy like Twitter, Instagram, and whatnot, or like a general hate crime law that exists in status code, and therefore, even if you're paralyzed, you can still report it to the police and get retribution that you deserve. The only contention to this is that no, Twitter is an international basis, and therefore there's no oversee. Dude, they have branches. I don't necessarily see why this technicality matters, because they can do this. They can shadow people in like literally everywhere around the world. But even if you don't buy this, there are
button. There are private account and whatnot. So the escapism utility in social media, with or without this ATL law, still exists, so it's metrical. But second, to talk about healthy political discourse, right? This is not contingent at all with UITI advocacy. Due to the fact that the polarization that exists, it's because of election in 2019 or like bad government conduct in general. So people who do ad hominem attack or a buzzer and whatnot is symmetrical. So then therefore the way that people criticize the government will be same either way in both sides of the house. Even when this is an exclusive consequence of our advocacy, we said this is good because people indeed people energized by the idea of emotional rhetoric such as anger and whatnot, as opposed to well-built arguments. So then therefore, this is something that is good to further our cause anyway. But thirdly, to talk about like the identification of fraud, privacy and whatnot, there is literally a law that caters this, like e-commerce law, like data privacy law and whatnot, or even like a general fraud law that you could eventually pander to, and that there is a mechanism that you could also report to the police. So at best, this is not exclusive. We can cater to these people. This people is protected, not exclusive at all. Fourthly, to talk about political horse trading. This isn't working when you're talking about activism. Political horse trading only works when you're in the parliament. That's to say, as long as they didn't prove whether you have a representative in parliament, which the only representative that exists is PSE, which I don't think they are. So we say that this is not something that the benefit that it cannot accrue in government side of the house. So two things. Firstly, talking about feasibility, right? So basically what they say, why then this is feasible, it's because that A, you have masses, B, because the elite have goodwill. This seems to be a self-barred in the government side of the house. Well, then this is not enough. Because number one, the political climate that exists right now, especially during the pandemic, the Jokowi administration needs to protect their legitimacy due to the fact there's a lot of criticism and whatnot. So less likely they want to actually pander to this and whatnot. But second of all, if they agree to this, it validates literally what their political opposition said in the past, and therefore it also reduced their political capital and whatnot. So at best, this goodwill and whatnot is a lip surface. What they need to prove is structural reasons as to why Jokowi want to do this, as opposed to just a mere example from a context slide. The comparative on our side, how sure. Government are bad, right? Government are evil and whatnot, but why then this is fine? Because the distinction in Penny's speech was pretty clear. The improvement on their side of the house means that there is an expectation of materialization of law. That's to say that you need to have feasibility as to why then you have this improvement, which never explained, and they actually concede that that's their burden. But the distinction on our side of the house is that when you're talking about abolishment, this is a mere political statement, because people understand that radical policy requires a long time. So even if in the same context of bad government, we don't have feasibility, it's particularly fine, because what we aim is Overton window. What we aim is that government being cornered and forced to do something that we wanted to have. So exactly the utility on our the utility of our advocacy still exists. But even if, let's just say, it requires us to talk about feasibility, it is feasible due to the fact that the reason as to why right now the goodwill exists, due to the fact that people want to abolish ITE law to begin with, then therefore you get the benefit in exactly the example in the context slide. So we say that to be consistent with this type of advocacy resulted in better feasibility. So in that clash we win. But second of all, let's talk about advocacy. So we posit that irrespective of feasibility, in and of itself, UITE law is bad, right? We posit two things. Number one, when you try to change your advocacy, you will losing masses. But B, it is in and of itself, UITE law is something that is bad. There is no responses to this. Why then this is important? Number one, if you're talking about losing masses, this is the interest of Indonesian liberal activists, because you need masses to operate your conduct further their cause and whatnot. Why then this is likely to happen? A, like what Tani said about consistency, the way that you shed light to this particular UITE is bad. When you try to affirm that this is good, people will be confused. But second, victim closure, like what Balia said, exactly because when you try to legitimize the law that exactly harming people will be mad. But lastly, the notion of improvement in of itself, the way that media frame it, the goodwill from the government, is not necessarily because people demanded so, but it's because of Jokowi's concern. Then therefore the attribution of success, and when you adhere to it, would be on the Jokowi and whatnot. It will anger the masses, exactly because they fight for it, but then the attribution of success would be on the government that is so good and whatnot that exists on their side house. So therefore we say losing masses are certain, and the harm that runs irrespective of visibility, and this is something that they have responded. But second of all, UITE is bad in and of itself, because A, we're talking about other things like other than defamation or other than slander and whatnot. We're talking about the conduct and on how government can eventually execute the policy to cater about defamation and whatnot. It means that even if that you have the ability to improve this, we said things like conduct and the attribution of power, to what extent government can have control over social media still exists anywhere on the side of the house, that means that the government can actually have a legitimate basis to do arbitrary action. It will be worse off even on that side of the house, because irrespective of UIT content, in and of itself, it is a political tool used by Jokowi's administration to do things like wiretapping, to do things like virtual policing, and those things have a political legitimacy, which is UIT. So even if, let's just say that, assuming at best case scenario possible, you would have a best possible reform on government side of the house, it is still not good, because the notion of UIT by idea, not by content, are something that is bad and will be capitalized on this administration over and over again to do things that harms the people's privacy, to do things like to harm people's freedom and whatnot. Why then this is important? Exactly. To talk about safe space in social media, if literally government can knock to your WhatsApp app and say that you're going to be arrested, this creates insecurity. So no safe space. But B, if we're talking about political discourse, irrespective of how well built your argument is, if it's attacking legitimacy of Jokowi, you would be arrested anyway. So all of those benefits, the prerequisite of all of those benefits is that limiting and restricting government's authority and power and conduct, which exists inevitably irrespective of UIT content, because it's by the idea, because they use this as a political tool. So what we've proven to you? We've proven to you that even if, let's just say, that you can have reformation, that people wanted to do this and whatnot, this particular harm still stands. And therefore, what we ought to do as Indonesian liberal activists, we have to oppose this, because this is the literally harming our core movement to talk about freedom, to talk about criticism, to talk about having argumentation, or literally to have this debate competition to begin with that criticizes Jokowi. So even if on our side of the house we don't necessarily have any particular policy, opposing this in of itself is good, because we reduce the political legitimacy of this law. Very proud to oppose.
The third speaker from the opposition team spent 7 minutes and 14 seconds. I call upon the reply speaker from the opposition team. Time is yours.
Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So I'm going to prove two clashes to why under our side we have an upper hand over government, right? The first clash is whether UIT is actually good, and second of all, I'm going to talk about which one has more likelihood to have a strong movement, right? In the first clash, whether UIT is actually good, I have 3 reasons why we have upper hand against our government. What did the government bring this debate? Firstly, they talk about UIT is necessary to prevent ad hominem speech and hate speech. Secondly, this is important to create a good discourse. Reason number 1, notice that this argument is not progressing as the debate runs. This argument runs on the basis of a contextless understanding where they refuse to deconstruct our characterization when we told you that if this is the only problem that UIT has, then we already have like a mitigating alternative, right? Which explained to you why, for example, commerce law to prevent fraud and anti-hate speech law to prevent offensive remarks and like social media policy is something that's enough, which until their whip speech has never been contested. The only response that Reinhardt bring, and it's probably already too late as well, is to say that this social media policy runs on the basis of like this international agency, right? I think this is not a far good enough reason due to the fact that there are no deconstruction of why this international agency is not an enough agency to have like a significant impact to counter this harm, right? Therefore, our characterization still stands, and their harms basically does not have that much gravity. But second reason, I don't know why they think that ad hominem is something that's bad, when they literally also concede to you that people in social media aren't experts, right? Obviously, how else are they going to like express their dissatisfaction on social media? But this is also a shallow generalization to assume that the government would not automatically reflect to the tweets, because there are actually spectrums of people who are experts on Twitter, right? But I think irrespective of the contents on Twitter, right, you don't get to decide that. You don't get to decide what are like the ad hominem statements, right? Like, I think that the government would be the one who decides that under your side. We've told you how the majority of cases UITE is used for is to arrest activists, for example, during Gejayan Memanggil, who actually have an evidence to their claims. This is also used to arrest, for example, Veronica Koman, even though there is an evidence. So you don't get to guarantee how the government will act. But under your side, all your cases is going to hang solely on the possibility of the government's benevolence, which they also fail to prove why this is something that's likely. The only response that they give was to say that the government have an incentive to be credible. But firstly, we say that this is a very simplified response as well, because there are so many protests about UU ITE, but the government has never reformed the law. The truth is, even if Jokowi said he wants to, it's never been manifested. But secondly, even if this is true, that this can be reformed, much more likely the reform is going to look like tackling the most niche problem of UU ITE. There is no response coming from a side government. We win this clash. But third reason, what have we brought in this debate is that we've explained to you so many layers of arguments and analysis to prove why this takes away all of the rights of people to have their safe space and to actually have like a discourse, which we say that this directly links into the interests of like liberal activists of Indonesia, which we say that because this has like very a lack of response coming from the government side of the house, therefore we take this clash. But in the second clash, right, which one has more likelihood to have a strong movement? Basically, the only thing that they brought in this debate was to say that we would get acceptance by the government, therefore we should compromise. But the question is why? Because there has never been any thorough analysis why the government have the incentive to do that, other than saying that the government have the incentive to be credible, right? We've explained how a lot of elitists and the government actually benefits from this types of law, and therefore there are no incentive for them to change this law, or even if they want to reform the law, it's not going to be a reform that we want. Under our side, at least we don't lose like our masses of followers who actually believes in us, and also because they are the victims of UU ITE, because they were wrongly accused and limited from their laws, limited from their rights. Because of all these reasons, we're proud to oppose.
The reply speaker from the opposition team spent 4 minutes and 23 seconds. I call upon the reply speaker from the government team. Time is yours. Please count down 3 to 1 before you start your speech. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. For clarification before jump to my clash. Number 1, the definition of interest liberal activists in this debate is really parallel. In government, we want to achieve healthy discussion. In opposition, they want to give closure. Listen, Chair, prerequisite of closure and development is contingent on healthy discussion that we want to achieve. The prerequisite of you giving closure and make sure that policies in the future will become better because government want to reform and doing a self-evaluation is exactly when you doing a healthy discussion on the government side of the house. The reason why you can gather more and not tarnish your image as a liberal is when you have a better political discussion and government that want to hear your story and want to hear your demand. For example, there is only existing government side of the house. So I think that the interest of liberal feminists that opposition want to bring in this debate is contingent of characteristic liberal feminists that want to achieve in this debate. But second, they are so wishy-washy in this debate. At first, they said that in government, less likely to improve the UU ITE because government is so evil and selfish. I don't know what is the purpose of Kak Teni bring this framing. Because under her logic, in opposition, you will also can abolish ITE. Because if government even don't want to compromise with our win-win solution proposal in government, in opposition, government more evil to shutting down your movement because they see your demand is too dangerous because you try to resist the power of government. Since first their visibility is shaky, please vote for government, we begging you, Chair. Thirdly, their point talking about ad hominem is also not make sense because the reason why people don't want to join in political discourse in status quo is because of 3 reasons which I already told you in my speech. Number 1, they feel like discourse is not productive. Ad hominem is even bad for gray area because they will see that political discourse is useless. There is no tangible outcome of this kind of discussion. But second, if this person is that uneducated like your side characterization, we are also more than willing to make an educated friendly content like easy statistic or graphic. That's not the problem and that's not the debate. But thirdly, even if that's true that these people is that dumb in your side, even though they opt into political discourse because they attract by your silly meme, at best they are not gonna contribute anyway. They are the only one that only make the nuance of political discussion become bad and trigger high tension in your side of the house. So at worst, we need to sacrifice this kind of people is really okay. But fourthly, they also really dismissive because they said that there is existence of another law or we can make the law. They never prove effectivity and feasibility of this kind of things. Making a new law is not like you told to your children to obey to your role. There is a lot of process to do it. You need to gather a lot of mass. You need to doing referendum. You need to doing a discussion. Most likely take many months, for example. But I think that the reason why people country make EU ITE is because the another law that exists in current context is not enough and specifically tackle the problem the society needs. That is why law is always developed and exists, and country always want to make a new law because they want to cater and follow the dynamic that exists in current context. Two reasons why opposition should lose in this debate. Number one, in the clash of political discourse, this is should go to government because opposition entered this debate with really lazy response. They said that this is symmetrical. Obviously, no. The reason why in your side bad political discourse is exclusive is because these people know whatever they do in the internet is leads into nothing. They got nothing. There is no consequences. That is why Prabowo haters like me will taken for granted and just ad hominem Prabowo because I don't want to ribet-ribet journal or statistic. Especially they never engage to our proposal that control people right is normal in democratic system for achieving the greater good. For example, you intervene the right and fruit of hard work of right people, of privileged people, because you want to doing a redistribution. But by the way, don't buy their example-based analysis on Gejayan memanggil. Because I also can show you forum bapak-bapak FB that is so toxic. So it proves to you that you can rely on people's subjectivity because this is really uncertain. So better to prevent harm in government side of the house because people mindset is really uncertain and different. They also never rebut my extension because my extension is really important to talking about narrative that politics is only for elites, which is really important to mapping the demand of society to give a counterbalance because we cater right now to more people in the digital democracy that is so inclusive, not elitist in opposition. On individual level, I think that this is also taken for granted. Because since back, I think the opposition only rely and contingent the benefit of subjectivity of people, which is really uncertain. We proud to propose.
The reply speaker from the government team spent 4 minutes and 25 seconds. That is the end of the debate. As the debate is silent round, the debaters may leave the building as the result will be announced on the closing ceremony of the 25th ALSA English competition. Thank you.